hate this topic because it's so boring to talk about, but I'm gonna spend the entire day sexifying it with all sorts of interesting B-roll. So I think the tank's gonna look pretty good at the end of today. Big howdy to all of my fellow and future hobbyists out there. My name is Matthew, I am your BRS beginner guru, and this is episode 40. I can't believe we have done 40 episodes of this series already. It's crazy. So if you haven't watched episodes 1 through 39 and evidently have 2 weeks of vacation to binge watch all of that comment, then we will put a link in the description below. You're gonna develop your own maintenance routine, but you need somewhere to start. My biggest warning for you is just be aware of your personal tendencies. If you're like me and super anal retentive with things, then your tendency may be to get your hands wet way too much and overdo things, which could upset the balance of your tank, but the opposite is also true, of course. So if you're a true beginner for now, just follow along with our recommendations and then adapt them as you need down the road. Well, let's jumpstart this maintenance video with all of those daily tasks that you will need to perform on your saltwater aquarium. First up, you're gonna have to feed your fish and your other livestock. I typically set a baseline of 2 to 3 feedings per day, but you're absolutely gonna have to adjust depending on what livestock you have. So check out episodes 36 and 37 if you missed them or need a refresher for more details. The second thing you're gonna have to do is 2-part dose, or if you're a little bit lazy like me, you can do something like the Tropic Marin All 4 Reef 1-part dose. It's half the work, really. This is for all of you newbies out there who went crazy with stony corals and other inverts who need to build their calcium carbonate shells and whose water changes aren't able to keep up with the daily depletion of alkalinity and calcium. If you just have a lightly stocked tank, you're not going to need to do this because your weekly or every other week water change is likely going to be enough, especially if you use a salt like the Red Sea Coral Pro, which is super high in calcium and alkalinity. But check out my reef tank. It is medium level stocked with a few SPS, but mainly LPS corals, and my weekly water changes just can't keep up, so I have to actually dose about 10 to 15 milliliters of All 4 Reef every single day to keep up with the depletion. Are you guys ready? This is step number 3. I'm gonna show you all of my observation poses. But seriously, number 3, observe your livestock. You're gonna have to do this every day and preferably several times a day. I like to sit down for 5 to 10 minutes, maybe even longer if I've just added some new livestock. This is how you're gonna get to know your tank and know your livestock. This is how you're gonna recognize disease and illness or nuisance algae growth before it becomes a problem. Once you know your tank, you'll know the sounds of your tank and you'll know the smells of your tank and you'll know exactly how everyone looks, and when something's off, you'll be able to diagnose the problem and hopefully get on top of it before it spreads through the tank. Daily task number 4 is check the water temperature. I don't actually manually check my temperature except when I'm doing water changes because I use different temperature controllers. My 2 favorites are the Inkbird or the Bayite because they're super inexpensive, but I do also have the fancy innovative Marine Helio system as well. That one costs quite a bit more. If you're like me and just get a temperature controller, then all you have to do is set the variance level and set when you want the alarm to come on if it either gets too high or too low, and then the obnoxious beeping sound will alert you when there's a problem. Daily task number 5 might be something you didn't think about when you were starting out, but you're gonna have to flip over your snails. It used to be that Trochus snails were everywhere and they were inexpensive. You could get them for $2 or less, but the thing about Trochus snails is everybody has figured out how awesome they are because Trochus snails can flip themselves back over. But if you have similar styled turbo snails like Margarita, Turbo, or Astrea snails, they may look the same, but they can't flip themselves over. So you're gonna need to go through every single day and see if there are any snails that are on their back. And trust me, this happens all the time. What I like to do is just get a piece of acrylic like this, stick it in, and flip them back over. If you don't flip them over every day, they will likely die and become food for your crabs or your other fish. And the 6th and final daily task you're gonna have to do is replace evaporated water. For all of you true newbies out there, let me remind you that only the fresh water evaporates. Salt does not evaporate. So when you refill your tank with evaporated water, you're only using RODI water or distilled water. If you were to keep adding salt water back every day, all you would do would be increasing the salinity of your tank over time. If you don't have an auto top-off system, you're gonna have to do it manually every day, which, trust me, gets annoying after a few months. So I'd recommend picking up some sort of auto top-off system. You can do something inexpensive like the Reef Breeders Prism ATO, which is under $100, or another option is the XP Aqua Duetto dual sensor system. It costs a little bit more, but it's really small, which is nice. I also use the rather expensive Tunze Osmolator, but it is by far the best one I have, and I've had it for over 5 years with zero problems and the exact same pump. Another thing for you true beginners out there is the only chamber in your tank that is going to vary in water height is the chamber that has your return pumps. Every other chamber will not get lower or higher. I know that seems obvious for all of you who have done this for a little while, but for a beginner, it's not always obvious which chamber is the one that varies its water height. That means that you're gonna have to check that return chamber daily and either fill it up to a specified line. You could put a piece of tape on there if you want, or if you do end up going with an auto top-off system, that is where you will place the sensors for that auto top-off unit. There are a lot of different factors that go into how much water is going to evaporate daily from your tank, such as the temperature of the room, the humidity of the room, how much surface agitation there is, and how big the surface area is. Let me give you two of my tanks as reference. First is the 65-gallon Seahorse macroalgae tank, which sits at 73 degrees, and the humidity inside our house is usually somewhere around 35%. It only evaporates probably a quarter gallon each day. But on the other side, you have my Clownfish Harem tank, which is also a 65-gallon, but sits at 77 degrees with more surface agitation, and that tank evaporates probably a gallon a day, 4 times more than the Seahorse macroalgae tank. But somebody keeps barking at me when I'm trying to work in the morning and do these filmings. Somebody thinks it's playtime, so she will sit over in the corner and bark at me, and it's so cute. All right, that wraps up the daily tasks. Now let's move on to those tasks that you're gonna need to do 2 times a week. First up is scrape the glass. I don't own like 8 flippers. I do own 8 flippers. I gotta stop saying like, because I used to have 8 tanks and I had a 1 for every single tank. So do I recommend the flipper for a magnetic algae scraper? Yes, I do. For those of you that don't know what the flipper is, it is a magnetic algae scraper that allows you to flip from the soft felt side to the hard stainless steel or plastic side in the water without getting your hands wet. It's fantastic. I usually start with the felt side near the top of the water, being careful not to do it too vigorously because then water will spill on the outside of the glass and then get in between the flipper and the glass, and then you just smear salt water all over the outside of your tank. One little technique I use is I run my hand along the top with the flipper just in case there is gonna splash. It'll hit my hand and not go on the tank. And then I also am careful with the felt side not to get too close to the sand bed, because your worst nightmare using any magnetic algae scraper is to get a piece of sand stuck in between the magnet and the felt, because then you will just scratch the heck out of your tank. Then I flip it over and I go to the stainless steel side since my tank is glass. If you have an acrylic tank, you want to make sure you use the acrylic attachment, not the stainless steel attachment. And then I carefully get all of my seams. I do the top of the water line and I get near the sand bed. And every week there's always places that you get that harder type of film algae that needs the stainless steel scraper to get it off. You can take the flipper out after every use and rinse it with some fresh water, but I usually just leave mine in the tank for about 3 weeks. That way I don't have to clean it every single time. But it is important to take out whatever magnetic algae scraper you're using and rinse it off, or over time it's gonna corrode, it might start to rust, and you're gonna get a whole bunch of coralline algae growth on it. But you can't clean everything with the flipper, unfortunately, because there are some places where a magnetic algae scraper either isn't the best or just won't work, such as the rear wall of your aquarium or the rear filtration chamber. And for that, you will need some sort of handheld scraper, and we have plenty of options here at BRS. Semi-weekly task number, semi-weekly or bi-weekly? Do you guys ever struggle with that? Is it semi-annual for twice a year? Semi's like half, right? So I feel like that would be twice. We're gonna go with semi. If I'm wrong, put a comment down below, let me know. Semi-weekly task number 2 is to change out your filter sock and or rinse out your sponge if you have one as well. BRS Investigates did an entire episode just about how often to change out your filter sock, and they discovered for the most phosphate and nitrate reduction, every 3 days is best. When I change out my filter sock, what I do is I pull the old filter sock out and I leave it in the rear filtration chamber or in the sump. I install the new filter sock, and then I gently squeeze the old filter sock into the new filter sock. That way I'm not removing a ton of salt water, and then all the stuff I'm squeezing goes into the new filter sock, so it's not like I'm just adding it back into the tank. For sponges, you can just rinse them in some fresh seawater if you are using your sponge as part of your biological filter, but if you have plenty of other biological filter media in there, then you can just take out your sponge, rinse it in the sink, and reinstall it. I usually like to have several cut up of the same size, so I can just pull one out and put another one in easily. And the last semi-weekly task is to fill your auto top-off reservoir. Obviously, if you're doing this by hand still, don't worry about it. But if you do have an ATO, then you're gonna have to fill up the reservoir as well. Well, I actually have a lot more to do, so I think we're gonna cut that episode here. So stay tuned for next episode, episode 40B, because we'll go over the weekly and the monthly tasks that you're gonna have to perform on your new saltwater aquarium. I've also tried to highlight several of my favorite products throughout the video, so if you're interested in learning more or purchasing them yourself, we will put a link down below. And as always, everybody, thanks for watching. Happy reefing. Be well. We'll see you next time.